Chapter 29. Irina's message to King Harman. Irina leaned out of the window as far as she could. Hugging the ledge, she watched the figure of Meinhard gallop through the village and across the plain to Captain Kellen, whom she recognized by the tiny flash of red on his helmet. She saw Kellen turn and approach the gold-armed king. Meinhard did not wait for a reply, but galloped as fast as possible back to the castle to resume his post as guard for the royal family. Squinting into the distance, Irina saw the figure of her father moving up and down the line. She was joined by her sisters, Mihaila and Jolene, who also watched, wondering if their father would heed their sister's message. Nothing seemed to be happening. Irina turned to her mother. "He's ignoring it," she said, unable to hide her disappointment. "No, he's not," said Mihaila in excitement. "Look." Irina turned to look. Not half, but a third of the army, all on horseback, raced across the grassy plains and disappeared into the deep blue shadows of the forest. The line of soldiers reformed, spreading themselves out a little further. Minutes later, they saw the archers send a volley of arrows down the far side of the ridge. "Look," said Mihaila in an agonized whisper. She clutched Irina's arm. "Vilmos's army must be approaching. They've sent the first arrows." The Queen joined them at the window to watch as archers sent a second and third volley of arrows. Even at this distance they could hear the battle horns blowing amidst the tremendous din of war cries. They watched as the line of archers pulled behind, allowing the right flank of the cavalry to charge. They couldn't see beyond the ridge, but they could hear the distant crash of metal on shields and swords and helmets, and screams of pain as soldiers tumbled from their horses. "This is wrong," Irina said quietly to Mihaila. Every muscle in her body was rigid with tension, her knuckles white on the window ledge. How cruel humans could be to one another, crueler than animals. In the forest, animals fought and killed and ate to survive, but this wasn't about survival. This had been created by Vilmos's lies to serve his desire for power and revenge. It was wrong to kill Nicholas's men. They were fighting under a false understanding. The battle horn sounded and Harman's soldiers rode out from their hiding place in the forest and charged into the right flank of the opposing army. "Father's holding the ridge successfully," said Mihaila. "We only have to worry if we see the enemy driving them back down the hill on our side." No sooner had Mihaila said this when they heard another horn, and it was not King Harman's. At the horizon, a long shadow appeared. "Oh no," groaned Irina, biting her lower lip. "What is that?" A strange howling could be heard. Irina's scalp prickled at the familiar sound. "It looks like... it is..." said Mihaila. "Wolves," said Irina with sudden realization. "Wolves, but huge ones. They're being led by someone very tall with black clothes like a magician." "Vilmos," said Irina. Nicholas heaved his tremendous weight against the grate, pushing with both hands. The small door still wouldn't budge. "Try pulling it," suggested Andor. His father dragged himself backwards slightly, accidentally kicking Andor's chin. "Sorry." Nicholas grasped the bars and pulled hard, and the gate finally gave way. "Ah," he said somewhat sheepishly, "it opens inwards." Andor pushed at his father's feet. Soon both of them had squeezed through the tiny opening and found themselves surrounded by ferns and trees and bushes, quite some way from Pavel Castle. They blinked and shaded their eyes as they adjusted to the sunlight. "Blackberries," said Andor, spying the little black fruits swinging from the brambles. "It's late for blackberries." They plunged their hands into the bush, ignoring the thorns, eating the tart berries until not one single one remained. As they ate, Andor noticed the oozing wound on his father's neck. Angry red lines were running from it, and Andor knew this meant the wound was infected. His father needed medicine. "Let me dress that little flea bite, Father," he said, tearing a piece of cloth from his undershirt, which was still more or less clean. Andor pressed the cloth firmly onto the bite and wrapped his father's neck with several strips of his shirt. "We must head to the battlefront," said Nicholas. "When people see me, they'll know the truth." "We'll have to start on foot," said Andor, cutting his father a staff from a young odum tree with a child's sword. "We may find horses on the way." "You kept the sword," said Nicholas, staring at it. "Once my hands were free, I could lever it out." 40 years in the muck and still sharp enough to save us. It was forged by Paylor, the famous blacksmith. See the sigil? A royal mark. They set out, glad to breathe the clean forest air after the putrid atmosphere of the tunnels. After a while, Nicholas seemed to fall into a trance-like sadness, and Andor knew he was thinking of his men, fighting for a false cause. Now and again he noticed a rustle in the bushes and saw a single pair of dark eyes staring from the undergrowth. A little later he saw the tips of 2 very long, delicate ears. They came to a stream. Lying face down beside the water to drink, Nicholas saw visions of beautiful faces, Undines with silvery hair, calling his name. "Come to us, dear Nicholas, come to us." How enchanting they were! "Irresistible," he muttered feverishly. He pushed his face, then his whole head into the stream, until Andor pulled him away. "Undines," said Nicholas, shaking him off. Andor grasped him more firmly. "Up we get, Father," he said urgently. "Lean on me." At that moment, the hare showed itself fully to Andor. With its tall bearing and intelligent eyes, the hare seemed almost human. Andor half expected it to speak. When he was a boy, he'd seen a hare like this, dashing through the crowds in Ragnar's town square to hide under the cloak of an old woman. A hare just like this one. The same hare, he wondered? Surely not. The hare hopped forward and paused to look at him. Andor understood he was to follow. The hare led them through a passageway of willow trees and away from the river. "No," said Nicholas, "we need to stay close to the water. When the Undines sing, I feel better." "Trust me, Father," said Andor. The pair soon reached a very dense part of the forest, where the vines and leaves and branches formed a fibrous canopy, barely penetrated by sunlight. The hare led them to a clearing where there stood a hut made of kenda saplings and covered with green creepers. There were animals around, a few chickens and some ravens, and Andor saw the pale shape of a goat moving in the trees. At the doorway of the hut, a crone appeared, all brambles, hair and flickering veins. Her eyes were like charcoal. "Razel," grunted Nicholas, rousing himself from his haze of feverish pain. He bowed his head in a gesture of respect. "Welcome, rightful king. You need rest." Razel's voice reverberated like an echo in a cave. It sounded like a man's, yet it resonated with a female quality. She took Nicholas's arm, and the great man went as meekly as a kitten, even allowing her to lay him down onto the mat on the floor. "It's the wolf bite," she said to Andor. "The wolf's saliva contained poisonous magic." She looked at the prince, and it was as if her charcoal eyes could see into his soul. "You'll have to go without him."